My name is Topa. I'm an ecologist with many research projects on Kangaroo Island, and I'm taking you on an expedition. Kangaroo Island is the third largest island of Australia, but it was not always an island. Professor Bob Borman tells us that the present coastline of Kangaroo Island has only existed near its present form since sea level reached its current level about 7,000 years ago. Approximately 22,000 years ago, sea level was about 125 meters below present sea level, and Kangaroo Island was part of the South Australian mainland, something that has happened at least 8 times in the last 800,000 years. Kangaroo Island holds an important place in the storyline of 3 of South Australia's First Nations, Narunga, Ghana, and Ngarrindjeri.
Kangaroo Island has one of the most unique and mysterious archaeological records in Australia. Prior to 10,000 years ago, the island was actually part of the mainland. And then as ocean levels rose, they flooded the Backstairs Passage, creating Kangaroo Island. Like everywhere in Australia, Aboriginal people would have been here early on, prior to 40,000 years ago. Yet, when the Backstairs Passage flooded, they became the first islanders, those that remained. And their archaeological record is unique compared to the rest of the country. And they made stone artifacts, sometimes called the Cartan tools, that you'll find here on the island. And around 3,000 years ago, a great mystery happened, and the Kangaroo Islanders disappeared, and we still don't know why today.
In 1802, Matthew Flinders of England and Nicolas Baudin of France were exploring the southern coast of Australia on sailing ships. They met accidentally just off the coast of Kangaroo Island. Many places on the island now have names given by Flinders in English and Baudin in French. The island was then occupied by a small population of sealers and whalers, and in 1836, the first official European colony settled on Kangaroo Island, establishing a tradition of agriculture. Nowadays, you can reach Kangaroo Island by plane, by boat, or by ferry from Cape Jervis. The eastern side of the island is the Dudley Peninsula, linked by a narrow neck to the larger part of the island. The main towns are Penneshaw, American River, Kingscote, and Pandana. Kangaroo Island has approximately 5,100 residents, but many visitors come over every year, so that in fact the number of people on the island can be much greater. All these cars and trucks driving very fast on our country roads cause many deaths and injuries among wildlife. Kangaroo Island is a very special place because it doesn't have the rabbits that have caused so much damage to the Australian flora and the foxes that have contributed to the decline and extinction of so many native animals after their introduction to other parts of Australia. Unfortunately, feral cats cause a lot of damage on the island, and a control program is underway. Often, curious native animals such as this brush-tailed possum find themselves in cat traps. Kangaroo Island is a biodiversity hotspot with amazing plant species. To protect natural communities, it's not enough to control cats, feral pigs, feral honeybees, and other invasive animals. We also need to control weeds. We have to battle many weeds on the island, including pine trees, the terrible bridal creeper and bridal veil, and now Tasmanian blue gums that escaped from plantations after the last bushfires. Our beautiful biodiversity starts with soil microorganisms and with the fungus kingdom.
Kangaroo Island is a very special place. It's very special for all sorts of things, but we find that the fungi of Kangaroo Island are absolutely magnificent. We've been coming over here doing our surveys of fungi, that is, we David, my husband, and I, since 2002. And we've been coming over every single year because it's so rich. There's so many different species of fungi. They're so beautiful. The beautiful ones, the really quite ugly ones too, but they've all got their own characters. And we reckon that there are probably about 750 species at least of fungi. Many of them are undescribed. We have described 2 new ones from the island, but I have got a list of quite a lot of other species which I have not yet described. Very rich, very diverse, and they are so helpful, they're so wonderful in the environment because there are the recyclers. They're the ones that break down the wood that builds up and the leaf litter which builds up, and they break it down into materials that the plants can use, that the animals can use. And then there are, of course, the helpers, without which the plants couldn't possibly manage. You wouldn't get trees the size they are without their fungal partners. And they really do a wonderful job collecting nutrients and water for all the plants. Then, of course, we've had the awful fires on the island, but the fungi have been doing a magnificent job at growing carpets of beautiful orange and black and purple, little disc fungi and other fungi all over the soil, cutting down the likelihood of erosion and making sure that the soil is in better state for the plants and animals which are going to come in after fire. So without the fungi on Kangaroo Island, the island would not be as wonderful as it is. It really is a wonderful island, and the fungi are doing their bit to make it so.
An association between a fungus and the roots of a plant is called a mycorrhiza. Most plants benefit from mycorrhizae, including in our biodiversity hotspot. Our beautiful terrestrial orchids have mycorrhizae.
Kangaroo Island has roughly 100 species of terrestrial orchids, that's orchids that grow in the ground, and they're very closely related to those on the mainland just across the water, which shows how all this land was once connected up. Some of them are very rare and some of them are very common, and they're all really unique little plants.
Many orchids are highly specialized and they depend on numerous links in their ecosystems to be just right. That's why they're such good indicators of ecosystem health. Unfortunately, the populations of large numbers of orchid species have declined in Australia and some are endangered, including on Kangaroo Island. The dominant, tallest plants in multiple vegetation communities on the island are 22 eucalypt species. They offer crucial habitat to animals from tiny insects to vertebrates and produce many flowers that are very important to nectar-feeding wildlife. Kangaroo Island endemic species, unique to the island, are found in different vegetation communities across the island, reminding us it has been isolated for quite a long time. Whether you like big plants like this grass tree, several hundred years old, or this tiny and rare trigger plant, there's something for everyone on Kangaroo Island. The diversity of vegetation communities is a delight for an explorer. You don't have to go far to find completely different plants and habitats. At the base of the food chain in these habitats, invertebrates also perform many other vital ecosystem services, such as nutrient cycling, pest control, and of course pollination. The island has dozens of species of native bees. Honeybees are not native to Australia. All our invertebrates are fascinating. This male wasp was tricked by the scent of the orchid, thinking it was a female wasp. It's now carrying the pollinia, and if tricked again, will pollinate another orchid. This Camponotus terebrans will mine a urine patch in sand for a month to extract all the nitrogen. Dr. Tony Robinson tells me we have around 10 species of snails and slugs on the island, and the same number of introduced ones. Spiders are among my favorite invertebrates, from tiny ones to much heftier ones.
So I'm a spider scientist and I live and work on Kangaroo Island. Now, Kangaroo Island is an amazing place for spiders. So the species I work on are species that have very small ranges. So they're found in one area and nowhere else in the world. And the species I work on Kangaroo Island are only known from Kangaroo Island. Because they've got such small ranges, it makes them really vulnerable to threats such as fire or flood or land clearance, which can take away their whole range, all of their habitat in one go. Now, I know most people don't like spiders, I get that, but spiders are really important to our natural world. Spiders are predators, and as such they have a really important job for keeping control of the numbers of the species they eat, so keeping the whole ecosystem in check and in balance.
Invertebrates are food for many of our vertebrates, including frogs and reptiles.
Kangaroo Island is home to 25 species of reptile and amphibian. 6 species of frog call Kangaroo Island home, as well as 19 reptile species, which include 2 geckos, a legless lizard that only eats ants, 2 dragons, a goanna, 11 species of skink, and 2 snakes. Kangaroo Island is also a stronghold for 2 reptile species, the pygmy copperhead, which is a small venomous snake native only to South Australia, as well as the heath monitor, which is also called the Rosenberg's goanna.
Rosenberg's goanna is the largest natural predator on Kangaroo Island, and Kangaroo Island is the last stronghold for Rosenbergs. We've learned a lot about goannas in the last few years. We know that they lay their eggs only in termite mounds, the young come out, and they have to live for at least 10 years before they're sexually mature.
Other beautiful vertebrates include birds. Of over 260 bird species recorded for the island, 17 are endemic subspecies. Our birds feed on many things, from invertebrates to berries, floral nectar and pollen, and even fish. The endangered Kangaroo Island glossy black cockatoo has a highly restricted diet consisting mostly of sheoak seeds. The dwarf emu became extinct with European settlement, as did several mammal species. Among the remaining mammal species, some are common and some threatened. We have pinnipeds, including the long-nosed fur seal and Australian sea lion, bush rat, swamp rat, brush-tail and ring-tail possums, an endemic dunnart, a bandicoot, 2 pygmy possum species, several insectivorous bat species, and a delightful echidna.
Kangaroo and echidnas are really special. They're one of the few egg-laying mammals in the world, along with the platypus. And on Kangaroo Island, our echidna is actually endangered. And we know that because we've had over 35 years of research about the echidna. They have long lives, they only reproduce every 2nd or 3rd year, and they live for 50 years. They are amazing.
And of course, we have the beautiful Kangaroo Island kangaroos and Tamar wallabies. Our western grey kangaroos are different from those on the mainland. They had not seen people for thousands of years when Matthew Flinders arrived on Kangaroo Island, and were so tame that he and his crew killed many for food, and he named the island after them. Introduced mammal species include house mice, black rats, cats and pigs, but also the Australian native platypus and koala. Oh, and look! There's a leopard on that tree. The marine environment is just as spectacular as the terrestrial one, but less well known. Different whale, dolphin, and fish species travel the Southern Ocean near Kangaroo Island. The coastline is rugged, with many cliffs and dangerous conditions that have resulted in shipwrecks. But beaches allow access to the keen snorkelers. Seagrasses, algae, and reefs host many creatures, and some of them, including fish of all sorts and colors, can be seen very close to the shore. Local artists such as Suzanne Tresui, Rose Stoll, Peter Hastwell, Sharon Clifford, Linda Jenkins, Indiana James, and many others find inspiration in the nature of Kangaroo Island. The island is one of the few westernized places on Earth to retain some wilderness. People come from all over the world to see the beautiful scenery such as the first European explorers would have encountered, and the unique wildlife. On Kangaroo Island, you can feel as if you were the first human being to see it. True wilderness can be seen in very few other places on Earth. It's very precious, yet it is threatened. Although the island boasts world-renowned national parks, including Flinders Chase National Park, wilderness protection areas, and other protected areas, alarming developments are taking place that threaten our public protected areas, including the authorization by the previous state government to build private developments, a golf course and private housing development will soon cover the Aboriginal artifacts and the rare flora of this coastal conservation reserve at the narrowest part of the island. It's a corridor for wildlife, an important place ecologically, spiritually, and archaeologically. Private hotel modules are scheduled to be built in our beloved Flinders Chase, biodiversity hotspot, the last wilderness with no fox or rabbit. The destruction of native vegetation is the primary threat to Kangaroo Island. It's also threatened by fires, natural and prescribed, and the effects are made worse by climate change. The summer 2019-2020 bushfires devastated half of the island on the western side. Many people lost their homes and 2 men died. Countless animals died in the fires or afterwards. Some people believe that prescribed burns are going to make it less likely that the island will burn in the future. However, when fires are too frequent, they dry up the bush and kill plants and animals whose populations are unable to rebuild before the next fire. Places that have burnt, burn again, and they are drier, poorer, and weedy. Other threats to nature include the impacts of tourism, for example, driving on beaches where vulnerable bird species are nesting, invasive species, increasing temperature, pollution. In the last few years, I've observed a decline in the health of seagrasses, which are covered in epiphytes. Is it a combined effect of nitrogen pollution and increasing temperature? Fortunately, on Kangaroo Island, we have many good people. Individuals and local organizations have come together to control weeds and invasive animals, to monitor birds and other wildlife, and to help the island recover from the bushfires.
So we've set up 100 shared monitoring sites across the island and developed a number of resources to help people to identify and monitor birds in the same place over time using standardised survey methods that are directly loaded into an app called Bird Data. So this is our Kangaroo Island bird identification booklet, helping to monitor the impacts of fire.
With some of my colleagues, I've been looking at the ecology of grass trees after the bushfires, including nectar production. Flower spikes grew after the fires, and millions of nectar-rich flowers went to waste because all the pollinators were gone. Among other research projects, we're also investigating the role of nest boxes in the recovery of insectivorous bats and pygmy possums. We're monitoring nearly 1,000 nest box cavities, all made and deployed by volunteers on 13 properties. Some are for bats, others for our 2 pygmy possum species, western pygmy possums and little pygmy possums. Bats are becoming a little bit more common in the boxes, but western pygmy possums have been recorded almost exclusively in unburned patches of habitat. Some have even been breeding successfully, making all the volunteers involved in the project very happy. We have not found a single little pygmy possum so far in our boxes and are concerned about this species since it's one of the ones that have lost most of their home range to the bushfires. We're surveying bats acoustically all over the island and also trapping them to collect DNA and measurements because little is known of the bats of Kangaroo Island. It's a great adventure. Although islands represent less than 7% of the world's terrestrial areas, they host around 20% of biodiversity and 50% of the threatened species. 75% of species extinctions since Europeans spread around the world have been on islands. Islands are extremely important to study ecology, biogeography, evolution, and conservation. Each species depends on a multitude of other species to survive and on the natural landscape. We cannot protect them in isolation. We must protect entire ecosystems. Like most islands, Kangaroo Island is threatened by increasing human population pressure leading to native vegetation and habitat loss. The impacts of invasive species and prescribed and natural fires and the threat of sea level rise are also made worse by climate change. However, everyone can make a difference, anywhere. If you care, lobby your politicians, educate others, and restore your local habitats. You can help to save the little bit of nature we have left, the millions of years of history it represents, and the vital ecosystem services it provides us.